Welcome to the third episode of 3-level series. On this last part, we're going to focus how to adjust to opponents, what kind of notes to make, and how to change our strategy based on those notes, and pay more attention to the HUD profiles and HUD itself. So let's get started. As usual, one table of PLO 25 zoom, and let's see what we've done. We should have a good amount of information on the opponents. So let's see when we get some interesting hands. Here is definitely an opponent. Let me put up my hologram on. Not sure if you can see. It's visible. 44-25-2. So playing almost half of the hands. Opening quite aggressively, doesn't 3-bet almost at all, and c-bets only 18% of time, so kind of player whose pre-flop is pretty wild. You can see the raise first in frequencies on the bottom, which are very far from optimal, and then small blind only 7, 1 out of 15. So definitely a player that is playing very non-optimally. And when someone is playing non-optimally, that's when we can start to adjust. And first question is how to adjust versus monochrome. I will mark him as good customer. Here he is on the top. If he c-bets the flop, definitely respect that. Heads up 18, multi-way 15. So plays a lot of hands, but is quite passive on the flop and turns. That's why it's really good to have those c-bet and flop statistics on the HUD itself, because sometimes those who play a lot of hands who seems to be like 44-25 seems to be a bit aggro, but on the flop he's actually very passive. So first adjustment is, of course, respect his flop c-bets way more than normally. So we would fold to his c-bets a lot more than versus unknowns or more balanced ones. We've got a lot of really tight players whose VPIP is less than 20. Actually, there's Mad Chaser, Budari, Evetrin, and Harry Holler. 4 players with VPIP less than 20. Funny thing is, if we put PLO 25 zoom rake into solver without rake back, then the solver strategy is really tight. So the VPIP is probably around 20 or so. Ace high flop, we miss it completely, blind versus blind. Problem is, we don't block anything. So ace 10-5 on that flop, whether we should bluff or not is really close with the fold equity. With at least some blockers, definitely would be profitable, but without any blockers, not a single turn that we could barrel. I just prefer to check and go to showdown. Short stack. I'm going to lean behind. Wonder for a while, should we lean behind? Natushka. Normally I would isolate an imper with queens, suited queens. There's a lot of tight players behind us on the button and on the small blind. But Natushka has played only 8 hands out of 40 and has called or limped each one of those. So when someone is playing only 20% of hands, then the problem is he can easily have in his limping range, or his limping range is actually ahead of us. And we make the second nuts on the river. We don't have any further information. So I'm just going to bet $1. It's a small pot, we can use a bigger sizing. When the absolute value is $1, it's quite a small amount of money for most people. People don't, on the small amounts, people don't think that money compared to the pot, like that's 80% bet. Close one. If we put, or take the solver sim of without railback PLO 25 zoom rate, which is really high rate, then the calling ranges are super tight. And I haven't focused, I have that PLO 25 zoom sim where the code calling is really low. So that was the days I run down most likely is a call, at least on PLO 25 where people are not super competent. Let's see if we can get to showdown so we can start to make notes out of people. Rainbow Jacks versus Mr. Monochrome doesn't 3-bet, very passive, and so far I have blind versus blind here on my HUD top right, which means that so far he has folded half of his big blind to small blind open. And if someone is folding 50%, then we can definitely open a lot of hands. Some people are overfolding big blinds, making it profitable to open almost any 4. And then the more opponent folds, the more we can start to open the more marginal ones. And as the opponent is kind of very passive on the flop, it means when opponent is very one-dimensional, like he only puts money, raises and bets on the flop if he has a really strong hand most of the times, then he shouldn't give you a lot of hard time. So then you can open hands like pocket jacks. You might hit the jack, but then on some boards the visibility is quite low. Let's say the board is 9-7 deuce and we have just a weak overpair. So then often like try jacks as overpair is a problem out of position, but when opponent is very passive, you often see the turn and river and then just can go to showdown decent amount of times. Here I have made a note out of opponent. He is 23-12. He played on different stakes earlier. And let me see. My note, it's in Finnish, sorry you don't understand it, is that he makes a thin value bet if you check river to him. It was a situation where he had the bottom set on the flop. I see bet, he calls, then on the turn straight completes. And I bet the turn, he calls, and then on the river flush completed and I checked. And he made a small bet with bottom set when there was straight completing, flush completing, and my hand looks like a straight. I don't know whether it was a bluff. I would assume that if it was a bluff, he would bet bigger. And we could 4-bet. If it was double suited, calling 4-bet would be very break even. We have no information on the opponent. He has 3-bet, 4-bet aces, and similar hand. I'm going to fold. Single suited, it's just not profitable. It's variant. Sometimes we hit, sometimes we don't, but it's slightly minus EV, even if he stacks off on any flop. With the double suited hand, if he stacks off on SPR1 on any flop, it becomes break even-ish. And then we open and we get call and 3-bet. This should be aces very often, but it's going to be a big 4-way pot. Gotta see the flop. And there he shoves, and now both of them can have aces. Which is we need like 33%, and actually we don't even need that much at the moment. So let's see, we have 36, which is nice. And I'm going to use cash out. But for a while, we would have won in. And there, ace king jack 10 and ace king 3-3. That's really loose. That's super loose. 3-bet when there's open and 2 callers. Even all the dead money there wouldn't justify that 3-bet. Blind versus blind, 61-2. So really tight opening range. Pretty much. Wouldn't be surprised to see aces. He's opening 1 out of 46 hands so far. And we have the blockers, but versus VPIP 61, who most likely has aces or king or queen. I'm not bluffing the river, and he has those aces. About that squeeze with ace king 3-3, definitely worth making notes. I have automatic notes for 3-bet pots, so I'm not typing those. And in the hunt there wasn't that much or that many hands to make more. Whether that was a brain fart or is it his strategy? We call 3-bet. Too bad we miss it. And on his flop check back range, I think he has quite a lot of flush draws, in my opinion. No, he had just naked jacks. Wow, that's kind of hand that if you, it's a bad 3-bet in my opinion. It wasn't suited to ace. Oh, it is suited to ace. Okay, then it's very marginal, but all right. A check back is fine, and then on the turn he can't really do much. Just go to showdown and hope he's good, which he was. Color coding definitely helps. I use simple 4-color coding, as we have 4 stereotypes of players. We have loose aggressives, regulars, rolling stations, and nits. And each one of those has its own color. Sometimes I've seen people use like they have 10 different colors. The problem, at least for me, is that I can't remember that many colors. And sometimes I tried using like different shades of green for different types of certain players. I haven't found that it would be that useful. Because then I have the HUD and notes that I like to make to give me more information, and the color code is just to give me a quick look. Like on normal tables, I will instantly see what kind of players we have on the tables, and on Zoom I can see from the lobby. Green is for good customer, yellow is for aggressive, so if there's green and yellow on the lobby, then and I know that there's players in the pool that I have edge versus. And then on the table, of course, if aggressive is yellow, then you can instantly see that, okay, we have aggro on our left. Because if you don't have a color code, sometimes you don't check the HUDs. But with the color coding, it's like a warning sign that, okay, we have some kind of idea what kind of known players we have. And Falco seems to be really Reki 26-19-6. Pretty standard. The actual VPIP pre-flop raise and so on among the recs, there's some variation, but when the VPIP is less than 20 and there's some kind of decency in the stats, then I often mark as a decent red. Middle pair, 9 blockers and a cutter, not enough to call. On the top left, we have the player who made the weird 3-bet with ace king 3-3. When you make notes, like I mark him as yellow, but I'm paying attention. And often it's good to every now and then check, like this Oakham here I mark as red, but I check, okay, he's still needy. Sometimes even 100 hands can give you false impression. Like the guy who 3-bet ace king 3-3, he might be really solid. He mislooked his hand, he misclicked, or he had a brain fart. Who knows, it's just one hand. So, general rule is bigger sample size gives you more reliability. And don't make really big strategy adjustment based on one hand. Sometimes in close decision, if we know that opponent has done something once, it's better than no information. But you shouldn't like make huge river thin value bets based on that he has called once, a bit more likely. Falco 3-bets. One of those hands that solver probably folds, but I'm going to call. And he bets small. Now this is either flush or flush blocker or pure air. And when I have showdown value, I'm going to call. If I didn't have, I would have had like 5-4-6 type of hand, or just 5-6 something. We could even raise, especially with ace of hearts. And he didn't have the flush or aces this time. Well, aces might probably snap fold the river too. But yeah, we showdown value. He gives us really good price to see the turn. Why not take it? A lot of reps and needs. Normally, as I check the player pool, average VPIP at the moment is 19, so it's really tight. Player pool is quite small, and then there's a lot of tight players. I don't think this is profitable at the moment. So to be fair, I wouldn't play when VPIP is below 20 on below 25 zoom high rate. Super hard to beat the rate versus VPIP 19 average opponents. Punari is very tight. He's the kind of player who doesn't raise even nuts until it's on the river. Mostly harmless. Rex. But for the sake of video, at least we have players that we have a lot of information, like Mad Chaser, we have 2,000 hands. Now, common question is also how to adjust versus Rex. That's the hardest part in poker. Let me change the... Oops. Let me move the HUD of this bottom right player into here so you can see it better. Versus Rex, it's often the HUD doesn't give you easy ways to exploit. It's more about nodes. Because HUD gives you the overall frequency, not context. And very often with Rex, the stats are somewhat similar. And unless you have thousands of hands, like what we have here, as an example, we have Hämäyssiirto, Finnish player. His c-bet in heads-up pots is 83, 15 out of 18, which is too much in terms of being balanced. So he's definitely c-betting way too much. So that we know. 83, and even in multi-way pots it's over 70. So now the question is, how can we exploit that? One thing is, when we hit strong, there's good reason to go for check raise because he's c-betting almost all the flops, even in multi-way pots. I mean, 73% c-bet in multi-way pots is super high. So it's easy to go for check raise. He's going to bet very often. And then if he c-bets way too much in position, we definitely want to float. Now, the next question is how often he barrels a turn. There on the previous hand, the opponent, I didn't show it to you, but in the hard, he folds big blind to small blind open only 14% of times, which means he's, on average, he's calling 86% of times the big blind. And what that means is we definitely don't want to open with wide range from the small blind. We open with strong hands, but we make a lot of money because he's defending a bit too wide. So here's Hämäyssiirto. We could go to the pop out and see turn, see bet 88, 14 out of 16. And river is 7 out of 10. Sample size gets small blind. He c-bets a lot of flop. He c-bets a lot of turn. He c-bets a lot of river. So now we know that on most runouts he just keeps firing, which means that with strong hands we definitely want to trap him instead of just check raising every time on the flop. And now the question, sorry. When to slow play, that's a whole new topic. It's based on how much we need to protect our hand and how many safe turns there are. And we can definitely raise turn way lighter than maybe normally, because he's just over barreling. So he's very aggressive when he opens the flop, opens pre-flop. And then we have the wrap with top pair. And no action. On the right we have Chayach, potential need, only 18 hands. I will wait for slightly longer before marking him as a nit. There's a lot of situations where someone has been really tight for 30 or 40 hands, but then at 100 hands seems to be a normal rec. Use plays unknown Finnish player, and we flop the open-ender with the backdoor flush draw. We would be quite happy to see the turn, so let's check back. That's a good card for us. And that makes life easy. We just call. If he would check, probably betting the turn. It's kind of problem if opponent is quite aggro, because he kind of knows we are capped. So versus very one-dimensional players, we can definitely bet the turn just to protect the hand, get value from flush draws, overpairs, but then good recs, we'll probably find a lot of check raises with not flush draw and hands, because we are very often, when we check the flop and bet the turn, we are capped to overpairs and bluffs. But in the river, you can value from possible overpairs, kings, queens, jacks. I'm going to watch this one because Falco isolates this Jusba, who's Finnish player, and let's see what Falco's hand is. Is it a legitimate 3-bet hand or not? He has 3-bet some hands that on on the node seems speculative, but sometimes it might be that he 3-bets versus shorty. Which is not shown on the frequencies. I'm not going to mark this Hamau seed as red. The interesting thing is that he's 2218. He doesn't cold call preflop, so he's doing that right. And fold c-bet in heads up pots. Well, of course the sample size is small because he doesn't cold call. So it's mostly that he opens and 15, 17, 37, 39, 50 seems pretty solid. So it might be that he has a good pre-flop range. He just slightly overplays it post-flop. Or it might work. I don't know. On my experience, if you're too aggressive post-flop, then people make too many call downs, slow play strong hands on Zoom way more than in normal tables, so not sure. Or it might work. I haven't tried that hyper aggressive where we just barrel river. So not sure how profitable it is. But now, if we know what opponent is doing, it cannot be profitable versus us. If we know that opponent has very one-dimensional strategy, and still his strategy beats our counter strategy, then the shame is on us. Now we know that he c-bets a lot, he barrels a lot, he fires rivers a lot. If he still makes money post-flop versus us, the shame is on us. We need to come out with a strategy that is better one. So yeah, now we have 20 hands on him, 11-5. I will mark him red, but pay attention. If it's just variance and he starts to loosen up a little, then I'm going to change the color code. In small stakes, it's very important that you adjust to your opponent. Because rake is really high, and especially Zoom. People often say that in normal tables it is easier to adjust because you constantly see what the other players are doing. You'll be on dynamics. In Zoom, you always have new players. The problem in small stakes Zoom is that the rate is really high. PLO 25 has quite insane rate. PLO 10 has even bigger. And when everyone is tight, they don't make a lot of big mistakes. So to beat the rate, you really need to exploit your opponents. Unless you play on specific hours where there's a lot of so-called bad players in the pool, then I would say that if you just execute your standard strategy, it's going to be really hard to make a lot of profits. It's hard to make a lot of profits anyway, but definitely should focus on how to exploit opponents. What do we know? Make nodes. Every node equals money. Mr. Titty calls the flop. He is kind of wrecked. Somewhat solid stats. But I mark him green because he has made some loose calls so far. And we bet the flop, he calls. On the turn, he check, and river, he bets. He is somewhat aggressive on the river. I think top pair blocking the nut flush draw. Blocking the nut flush draw is not good, but he might turn some missed flush draws to a bluff there, like with pocket queens. This time he had the 10 for the straight. But he might bluff the same hand without the 10. And of course, when we check the turn, Yeah, we have some straights, but if we fold that hand, we're folding quite a lot of our range. Okay, aces versus aces. Nothing interesting there. Now Chayat is 9 out of 5 when we have 23 hands, so he is a confirmed tight player. Here the player on the top, Arhimature. Here on the top right of the HUD is blind versus blind 14. So he has folded 1 out of 7 small blind versus big blind. Yeah, sample size is 7 hands, but he's called 6 out of 7. So there's a high chance that he's calling real live. So until we get more information, we can assume that he's defending big blind really wide versus small blind open. But the thing is, if he folds the second or the 8th hand, then it's 6 out of 8. It drops to 75. And then if he folds one more hand, it drops to the 66 or so, which is more closer to the balanced one. So once again, the weight we should give for the read is always based on the sample size. And of course, pretty much no matter how much opponent folds, when we have top 30% of hands, then we definitely open. I don't really like the flop bet that much. We don't have any blockers, we don't have any equity. And Match Chaser is raising 22% of hands on the flop, which means that he can definitely raise as a bluff. And I think he is... Well, he's probing turn only 12% of times. And doesn't float a lot. I believe him. But if we make 1/3 bet, he needs to be folding 1 out of 4 times. So even if he defends with half of his hands, which is really wide range, then it's still profitable. So I like to make those 1/3 stabs with high-ish frequency. Now that our new friend Chayat decides to call here. Bit of scary when the tight player wants to see the flop. Range is very Broadway card heavy. Pocket pairs, Queen X. Not making moves there. And we had a nice hand, too bad. We have a really tight player on the big blind. Let's see it flop, we miss it. Kind of player that nothing really indicates that he is calling down lively. So let's make a double barrel bluff representing straight, but he comes over the top, which means that either he has aces or he has the ace jack. And the blocker bluff didn't really work. But on the hand, nothing indicated that he would be calling way too much. It's like more like solid-ish rep who definitely is folding every now and then. A bit loose open. But let's try to get some hands, some actions, some situations. But in the flop, this is the guy who 3-bet the random ace king 3-3. Let's check back the turn and make the nuts. And make a small bet, maybe induce a loose raise. And he calls with ace-7. Nothing too special about that. It's kind of a spot where he has decided when he checks the turn, I check the turn, he's going to call any river. People do that. Might be worth making note that snap calls river with 2 pairs. So we know that when we make some kind of draws or think about implied odds, we know that probably versus that player we have somewhat more implied odds, especially in spots where turn is check check and river is bet. But now typing same time as I'm recording the stream would be really hard, so I'm not making any notes. But that's definitely worth normally to make a note. So any information like how wide he calls rivers in situations when we have bluffs in our range, at least in his mind, it's a good thing. Middle pair only backdoor straight draw, and Chad decides to bet into 2 people. We call there, we just have to fold so many turns or go to showdown and lose it very often. Too bad we don't have any huge calling stations on the pool at the moment. But if we would have, then the easiest way to adjust to those who call too much is to start to value bet way more. Neat wakes up with 3-bet hand. And here, Arhi on the big blind folding 1 out of 8 only. Even when it's unopen, ace jack 9 3, I wouldn't open. Tight player opens, ace king jack 6. Really close. I'm going to fold without suited ace. Big blind was this Budari, it's really hard to get value from him, and 3 ways we can't really bluff that much. But that's definitely something that I might check after session on PLO 25. Zoom, should we go to call that without suited ace? With suited ace, definitely, but without one, way more borderline. He's opening 2 point something. If he opens spot, I'm probably folding, but now he opens so small, and now this happens, match ace or wakes up. Just going to fold. For heavy, they normally see bets around 50% of times. Rainbow flop, let's call. We pretty much have to dodge 5, 6, or 7 that are quite bad or makes it a bit more problematic. And now he checks. We definitely want to get value, but we don't want to bet too much. We want ace X, ace 8, ace 4, ace with a cut shot type of hands to call us. And often if he has ace X that he checks on the turn, he's always check calling. Now the big one is Hepsi. Something over 50 hands, but 64, 43, 14. So seems to be a really active player. So I mark him as yellow. There's a chance that he is one of those action junkies. So at least I can pay attention. And now there's Icho Tolant who 3-bet the ace king 3-3. 24, 16, and 10, but it's 4 out of 40. So he seems to be pretty solid. Of course, more sample size, but not sure whether that weird 3-bet was a brain fart or not. Here we have short stack opponent and SPR2. Let's just put the turn and shove the river. See if he has the full house. No, he has the jack high flush. Another interesting topic is how to adjust to short stackers, because solver strategy versus short stacks is assuming the short stack are playing solver preflop, but most of the short stackers are not good players. They play short stack because they are more recreational, so their preflop ranges are very far from solver ones. So then how to adjust? One is, if we have a hand, what do we know about their opening ranges? Are they short stackers who call too much? Are they short stackers who want to gamble? And then, if we look to normal tables, not Zoom, but normal tables where short stacker is, then there's actually interesting strategy decision. Do you want to keep the short stack on the table or not? If you want to keep the short stack on the table, then you don't want to get a lot of preflop flips with him. I'm not going to check the turn. Not sure if he ever bluffs, but at least give him a chance. I mean, we have the hand locked. Jack would be the only river that we're kind of scared. And now in the river, we wanna get call from king. If he has a full house, he never folds. So weird. What queen jack might play it that way? Jack 10. But on the river, he pretty much has trips, full house, or air. So in normal tables, it's more about, do we want to keep the short stack? Sometimes the short stack, he's in a position where we can use him as a leverage towards the big stack. Like on certain low SPR pots, we bet half of the short stack. So if short stack shoves, it puts a lot of pressure on the other big stack. If he calls, we can reshove and so on. So sometimes you don't want to get rid of the short stack. So then we don't want to make 50-50 flips preflop. But sometimes you want to get rid of the short stack, like really short stack. Just if he loses money, there's a chance that he just leaves and you get a full stack on the table. Like if the short stack is really tight, neat short stack they are kind of useless seats on the table. So then What? Sorry, let's play this one first. Flop goes check, check, turn, he min raises. We don't have any other option than to call. And he had a 9-6. Okay. That's the only hand that makes sense, but thank you for min raising. We have kind of more. So then if you have a neat short stack and you just want to get rid of, then you might think 45-55 flip. It's marginally minus EV, but we can assume that if we can bust him out, then we get a more profitable player instead of him. Then he checks back, so there's no reason for him to bluff the river suddenly. So let's bet and get value from straights, flushes, or 2 pairs. Actually 3 pairs. And even if you make slightly minus EV flip with the shorty, if he doubles, he stays on the table, and then you will have a chance to get the money back anyway. But yep, sometimes you make slightly minus EV play on purpose. If one of the outcomes is more profitable to you. Let's defend the big blind. Bit marginal hand. But Mad Chaser is a bit passive on the flops, checking a lot, gives us a lot of free turns when we choose to. And now he pots the turn, can't call with just the flush draw, so you can keep it. It was not a good flop for us. And on Star Zoom you don't have that many short stackers. Especially on 25. But if you go to GG poker or normal tables, then you will have a lot of short stackers. And in Zoom, of course, the lineup is constantly changed, but if you go to play normal tables on any other side, then a good way to improve your thinking is constant thinking. What do I know about the opponents? What are the adjustments I can make based on the information I have? So instead of just mindlessly grinding, executing basic strategy, sometimes you might want to focus on 1 or 2 tables and really think, what do I know about the opponent? What notes do I have? How do I change my strategy? And sometimes it's actually quite fun and interesting. So we don't play to grind money, we play to improve our mind and strategy and thinking. Whoops, 50 minutes, wow. That was fast. On the previous hand, I'm going to show it to you. Where is it? When we talk about making notes, here, definitely worth making some notes. He bets half a pot with 2 pairs. I don't think there's nothing that special about that. That's not like, oh my god, from that player. I think he was a bit higher VPIP player. And then completes the flush, he checks backs. And river, he calls these. And now, in my opinion, that's a bit loose. A bit loose call. Oh, he has a queen 8. But still, when I call the flop, my range is pretty much flush draw. I have some small straight draws in my range, and then 8xx. And out of that, I would bet flushes on the river. I might bluff with 5-3, 6-5-3 if I have a spade in my hand. But I don't think he kind of snap called. Which makes me think that he's, like on the previous, when opponent called with 2 pairs on similar spot, he just decided that he's going to call the river. I mean, queen improves his hand, but versus my betting range, it doesn't matter whether he has 8 deuce or queen 8, in my opinion. I would never bet 8-9 here. So the queen might be deceiving. He might think he has better hand. In reality, it doesn't really affect anything. So I don't think he should call the river. In my opinion, at least not snap call, because then he doesn't think about my range. He just decided that 2 pair I'm going to call. So definitely would make a note that calls flushing river with 2 pairs. Because if he makes a bit loose call there, he's going to make a lot of bit loose calls on different situations. Like if he bets the turn with the set and river completes a straight, he's definitely going to call half a pot bet very often, and so on. So all kinds of information, especially from big call heavy players, how wide they call rivers is very profitable. If you remember some of the other videos where we used poker choose to find out how wide we can value bet versus calling station, then based on how wide he's calling, our value range can change a little, or it always changes a little. But it's easier to think how wide we can value bet if we know how wide opponent is calling. Like if he calls snap calls there with 2 pairs, then we would value bet all our flushes, for sure. Blind versus blind, and we have the ace with king blocker. Really small bet. I'm going to raise. If he re-raises, then he has the set or flush, and we're drawing pretty much dead. But when he bets small, he just gives us the opportunity to do that raise. And opponents are doing that to us, so you have to do it to opponents to even it out. Otherwise, they end up exploiting you if you fall to those raises, but you never do it yourself. Somewhat tight-ish player, and we have the set, and we're blocking the 8th. And it's kind of spot that if we bet and he raises, it sucks, we have to fold. And if he calls, unless the board pairs, it's going to be really bad unless the runouts is rainbow small ones. So if he bets bigger, then we are in kind of spot that our opponents were, except we didn't bet the flop. Going to call that small bet. He would have gotten more if he had bet slightly more. Yeah, well, he would have called the flop, and then we would have checked all the way. So same outcome whether we bet the flop or not. Alright, 53 minutes, closing on 1 hour. Let's go for an hour or so. Too bad we don't have any huge maniacs on the pool or the calling stations. But I think there has been some interesting spots and information on the opponents, how to adjust. I think that now in solver era, there's bunch of players who go too far on solver strategy, like they just try to imitate solver strategy without adjusting to opponents. And I don't think that's the optimal way to play poker, and it is not the optimal way to play poker. But solver strategy is good default strategy, but if you play even for 1 day in Zoom, you will get information on your opponent. Even when you play a couple of hour session, then after 1 hour you have information on the opponent. So if you're not using that information to improve your EV, then you're just giving up money. And this guy is so aggressive that I'm going to call the turn. And I'm going to explain I think I need to call the river. He has the check. He does have that some of the time. But you can see the opponent here, 65-42, and both for aggression, 60-60-70. Betting 75, heads up 60 on multi-way. So, I need to answer just a sec. The software I'm using for recording, it doesn't have pause button. So sorry for this. But yeah, I could edit it afterwards, just answer the phone and clip it away, but I like to keep my editing simple, so sorry for that. But you can see the opponent is very aggro and quite active post flop. And the reason why I do it, he doesn't bet the flop, so I don't think he ever has an ace. He's c-betting so much that he would bet all the ace. So now this is a draw or check or bluff. And half a pot could be a check. I would assume that if he had a check, he might bet slightly bigger, to be honest, but that's a half a pot bet. Makes sense. And river is kind of blank if he has a check, and he bets half a pot again. Could be jack, could be queen then, could be flush draw, could be total air. Probably he has something on the turn. Not sure. Like a small flush draw, he doesn't bet on the flop. So I think he justified the call, and he has the jack this time. Definitely in his range, but the total range. Now let's go back. We need to pay 174 in the $7 pot, which means that we can 1 to 4 odds. So if he's bluffing 1 out of 4 times, it's break even. If he's bluffing more, it's profitable. And I think his river bet might be 50-50 with jack and bluffs. So quite easy call. So let's see if we can get one more, and then the hour is up. Did we get carded when we're waiting for the last one? Okay, let's open this one. Shorty button. Voting 3 out of 9. I think we can bet small. I mean, give him a chance to fold his air, but he comes over the top. Means he has hit the board. Nice way in his mind, and nothing we can do. Another option is to just check fold. When someone doesn't fold, he's shorty and we haven't hit the board, but when it's paired, we do have some fold equity. Overpair with just the cutter versus someone who's not over folding. So let's call that half a pot bet. And now he bets bigger. Instead of getting the free turn river. I mean, the hand that I'm slightly afraid is King Queen, but he will have a lot of King X draws. Now all the flush draws miss, turn straight draw miss. We have the 6 blocker. And he's fairly active on the river, aggression 64. But if he bets after going to time bank, it's always a bit more scary. With the 6 blocker and we don't block spades or hearts, let's make a hero call. But when he goes to time bank, I wouldn't be too surprised to see the 6-7. But he has a Jack 7. So, got it right this time. And one thing I'm going to show you, I hope you don't do that often. King 8-5 board with a flush draw, and he bets half a pot. Well, you can bet half a pot, but I would like to use on this board, if it's rainbow, half a pot is fine. But when there's flush draw and 8-5, there's not half of the depth that completes a straight, so it's kind of dynamic, draw heavy board. Then, if he actually, let's say he has a set of kings. If he has a set of kings, would he ever bet half a pot? So, half a pot on this board, either he's using half a pot with his whole range, which I don't think is a good idea, or he has different sizings for semi-bluff hands, weak hands, and then for the pure value hand. And turn opens up million draws. And now he bets slightly bigger. Now it's more like 2/3. It's not even 75%, so it's still, if you had a set of kings, right kings, you would pot here. So once again, his sizing is a bit small-ish, which makes it a bit, what I lost the word. It makes it a bit weird, suspicious. Yeah, suspicious is the word. King, queen, why bet so small? Of course, he could have like kings with ace high flush draw, like he's totally crossing the board when I would get it, but that sizing is a bit weird. And then on the river, he actually went for the time bank and then chose to bluff. If he had made a quick bet on the river, I would be more happy to make that call. Of course, now it's a strategy with the 6 blocker. He's changing, like, would he value bet king queen? I don't think. Would he value bet set of kings? That's a bit closer. Whether he has the 6 or 7 in his hand, might value bet kings, but I don't think he has kings. So if he has the hand strength like 8-5, often bets half a pot on the flop. If he has 8-5 with the flush draw, he's not betting the river, because 4 completes a draw from the flop. It's not the backdoor straight that gets there. So when he bets the river, he's pretty much representing 6-7. 6-7 with the flush draw might make sense, definitely in his range. As I said, I wouldn't be too surprised to see the 6-7, but there's so many other misdraw things that, like here he has cut shot and flush draw on the flop. I'm not sure if he should even bet the flop with that hand instead of just seeing the turn. Might be that he thinks that on king high board, when we check, we're really weak. Solver, at least if I remember right, Solver is checking a lot of king high flops out of position. And if he gets check raised, it really sucks with that hand. And turn, he has a double cutter, bet small. If you pot it, you make me fold. So I think the sizings were a bit off with him. And one thing you can do when it's half a pot on a board where you should use like 75% sizing, then if you have the heart now, I don't know how many hands I have on him, can't remember, but if we have a lot of hands, you could open him and your tracker and just filter out when he bets the flop and see, is he always using half a pot, or is he using half a pot with semi-strong hands? And if you get that read, it's really profitable read. So when someone uses sizing they shouldn't use in good solid strategy, it's a spot where you can investigate more. And I have to say I have been pretty lazy on those. haven't done that work too much, definitely should. Especially if you play a lot on the same player pool, any information can be super valuable in the long run. But we're over 1 hour already. Let's not make a marathon video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope at least I gave you some thoughts what to pay attention to on the HUD and on the tables, what kind of notes to make and how to adjust to opponents. The actual strategy, like how do we adjust versus certain things, it's always a bit complicated. You can't just say that if opponent does this, you always do this. Because often, let's say if opponent doesn't bet often on the flop, then there's other stats and things we have to take into account. They might correlate to each other. So you have to see the whole picture, big picture, and then pay attention. But if you have an opponent that has some kind of tendency, who's unbalanced in some scenarios or situation, and you don't know how to adjust exactly, then post it on the Discord and let's figure it out together. There's the PLO strategy discussion, put it up there and you will get help. Alright, hope you enjoyed. This was the third part. Off to the next video next week. Bye bye.